Hey, everybody.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. Well, since we're all up, let's call the meeting to order. And Mr. Mayor, if you do us the pleasure of an invocation today.
I'll be happy to ask you to all join me in prayer as we pray for those who have been affected by the horrific humanitarian crisis now going on in the state of Israel. God, please be with those families who've lost loved ones and those who have been wounded and captured. And I know it seems like a difficult road, but please bring peace to Israel as soon as humanly possible. In your great name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for being mindful of
That's horrific.
our people
That's
in
horrific.
Israel. Yeah, it is. It is. Approval of September 25th meeting minutes. There's a motion.
So move.
Properly moved and
Second.
second. Good. Thank you. Any questions on those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Acceptance and dedication of rights away. Is Mr. Bryan up?
I'm taking Tom's place today. He's
All right, great, Mr. Altop. You want to approach E1?
yeah. So E1 is a stormwater dedication of a drainage easement. Matt, I don't know if you can speak to this a little bit more. I know it's at 2421 Ashley River Road.
Sure, I could. Yeah, I believe this is the Homes for Hope easement where it's an existing Charleston County drainage easement, and the county is working to abandon that easement to the city, and then the city would take over an easement if it is abandoned by the county and brought in by the developer to basically continue the drainage pathway of offsite water that comes through that site from the roadway and then continues downstream through another drainage system.
Okay. It's a pleasure of the committee.
Move for approval.
Properly moved and seconded. Any more questions on that item? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Altop, you're gonna speak to the temporary encroachments?
Yeah. So all the temporary encroachments are your standard encroachments this week. There's a couple signs and some sidewalks. Everything's been approved on our end, and Tom thinks that we should go ahead and get these approved.
All right, that's just for information. Item G1, environmental update, Mr. Altop.
Yeah, so environmental services running on time this week. Last week, the new app is out there being launched. We haven't even got the word out, and we've had a number of people installing it and using it on the regular already. So there's been good gain on that. But that's really about it this week.
Well, listen, keeping it short is progress. You remember when our reports used to be very long?
I do.
Because we were dealing with problems, Mr. Chairman.
That's right. Those problems have been whittled down. Thank you for all the good work. G2, permanent encroachment approved for 575 Meeting Street. Mr.
Yeah, so this is for a new development to install an overhead canopy over the door entry there on 575 Meeting Street. The bar has approved this, so it is recommended that this is approved.
It's a pleasure of the committee. You have a motion?
Move for approval.
Councilmember Ross Appel moves. There's a second out there.
I'll go ahead and second it.
Okay. Any questions on that awning? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. H1, update on Charlestown Estates. Mr. Felton?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an item requested by Councilman Shade
Right.
related to the drainage improvement project, as well as a CWS improvement project for their sewer system over on Charleston Estates. I can give a very brief just overview of what that was, if that's helpful for
That'd be great.
the screen. So this was one of our small project allocation projects where the committee and council supported an allocation of money into doing drainage improvements as a kind of a quick start style project. We did a review with a consulting firm, in this case, Thomas and Hutton, of some different improvement options. And interestingly, the modeling and some of the field survey work showed the best improvements were really for reopening the existing canal system. And then we found some pipes under Old Town Road, some DOT pipes that had been kind of clogged up and blocked, and came up with a design to realign the ditch into those pipes and then obviously unclog the pipes. Went through that process. When we were starting this work, we were coordinating with CWS. CWS was saying they were having a lot of issues with sanitary sewer overflows, which is part of what I think Councilman Shade brought the project to us in the first place, saying that the stormwater obviously creates some pressure on the sewer system. No one really likes to see sanitary sewer coming out of the manholes in their yards. So CWS also had agreed to build a new pump station to replace a temporary pump they were using in this area. So we coordinated our two projects together. The city, and got to show the area right here. This is Ashley Landing, Sumar Street being just to the north here. Sumar Street flows to Old Town Road, but the southern part of the shopping center flows south through this drainage system that goes through Charleston Estates, down to the canal, and then out into the marsh under Old Town Road.
Right.
We came through basically and improved this canal here, which I'll show a picture of in a second. CWS worked with the church here to build a small pump station that helps kind of this entire region's sewer flow. Those projects are now complete and seem to be performing really well through some of the recent larger storm events we've had. This is the after the fact canal, after we our field ops crews actually did most of the restoration work and construction work through here. We obtained a few easements with the help of Councilman Shade from some of the residents, able to straighten out the canal, which you can see in the picture on the right, and bring it more cleanly into this culvert system that goes under Old Town Road. Interestingly, it looks like large box culverts. It's actually smaller pipes within those culverts. Those are just a kind of an entry point into the existing pipes.
Wow.
We think that's because there's a very large CWS sewer line that comes north to south through Old Town there. So we're able to work through all of that. CWS has now finished the majority of the work on their pump station. Their pump station's online. I think they're just doing a little bit of cleanup on the site, and seem to see pretty significant neighborhood improvements. So a good indication of where small project allocations can make a big difference in a year or two worth of work, rather than a 5 to 10 year type scale for a capital project.
You're right. That was a lot of bang for the buck. What's the name of that street? I think was it
Dowden.
Dowden. I knew it started with a D.
There's Dowden and Dowden Court.
Right. I mean, it literally had raw sewage come up out the manhole and actually up into one of those ladies' homes. I remember that. It's the size of the pipes under those culverts. What are they, Mr. Fountain?
I'd have to double check, Mr. Chairman. I think they're on the order of 42-inch pipes, something like that. They're still very large pipes, just not as big as those
The
boxes look from the picture.
I agree. Any questions from the body? Councilman Shade, any comment?
Well, I just want to say this was a long time coming, and I appreciate Matt persistence with this project. This was a situation when, and excuse the pun, but a perfect storm in more ways than one, Mr. Chairman. Storm actually taking place, and we got a phone call on my birthday several years ago, and when we had a rain bomb, and people's properties were being flooded, and the sewer, it overwhelmed the system so bad that sewer was backed up and sewage was getting into people's residence. It was really just an incredible thing. In addition, looking at the slide that shows the culvert and the three openings there, if you look backwards towards where those cars are coming out at Charleston Landing, a temporary station, and Matt, correct me if I'm using the incorrect terminology, more towards where the blue car is, where that shrubbery is. Right. They had built a temporary station there, and in the process had stopped up a drainage ditch, and more water was coming in on the other side of the cul-de-sac of Dowden. So this residence was getting it from 3 or 4 different angles in the process. And then across the street, you are very familiar with the issues with Charlestown Estates. I think I get these numbers confused. One, over where Nell Postel residence is, in that area, and the sewage was backing up there as well. So the collateral impact, and when Matt showed on, Matt, if you go back to screen 2, just for 1 second. Yeah, so you see where that black line is. All these residences back here on this area going towards Sam Rittenberg, those houses were being flooded as well because that canal was just not open, and that ditch was clogged up. So I just wanted to bring this up to the attention to the committee for a variety of reasons. One is what a small project funding can do to improve this area. Now, this is not lots of homes in here, but it is a good number of homes back here that are being positively impacted. And we weren't sure of the impact when actually landing made those improvements on those out parcels along Sam Rittenberg, if that had any negative impact on this. So a lot of good came out of this project in this discussion, and just got to tip my hat to Matt for following through with this, and with our partners at CWS, Mr. Chairman, because this was a joint coordinated effort. This is what we can do project, and as Matt said, I think we're about 95% complete on that CWS station on the other side that's shown in these slides. So thank you all for hearing about this. There are other projects still in the works we need to get done, but this is one that took a little while, but we got it all taken care of.
No doubt, good bang for the buck.
Yes.
Any more input on this, Mr. Mayor, or any other council members of council? All right. Discussion on H2, Lake Sandhurst, requested by Councilman Shaid, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is basically an aerial photo of the area we're talking about. This is Sam Rittenberg here coming across the North Bridge, the CVS, Orange Grove Road coming off. If you kind of go behind the Rose's area, there's a large, I think it's like 9-acre lake, 8-acre lake that sits back in the neighborhoods here that the roads drain into, and then that lake discharges out into the marsh. The lake was created when the neighborhood was built as an amenity for the neighborhood. And I know Councilman Shade has had some requests from the neighborhood to look at options for the city to assist them.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may comment on this some more.
Sure, Mr. Councilman Shaid.
Sure. So, as Matt just referenced, this lake was built out, and on the top corner up here, Matt, if you could show that dam where it says Winchester Drive right there. Yeah. So that's a earthen dam there, and you can barely make out that little speck.
Right.
It's like a pump. I think not right, Matt, right there, but a pump right there.
It's not
So,
like, it's not like it.
Yeah. So there are 31, 32 homes that are around this lake. And it was a lake built in the 60s. And when you talk to the residents who have been there for quite a while, they'll tell you that this lake was an amenity for the neighborhood. It's a sort of a separate corporation of sorts, separate apart from the rest of Sandhurst. They used to swim in it, small boats in there, tie a rope to a tree and jump into the lake. It was a natural pond or lake that provided pleasure and aesthetic view for many of the folks who lived in this area. At the time, and Matt can correct me on this, we have our drainage feeds into this lake. And as a result, there's a lot of silt that is built up on here. And there's some erosion that is taking place along this lake that is creating a huge problem for the surrounding landowners. They're faced with a huge bill to clean this thing out and take care of some of this area. But if you drive around Winchester Drive in particular, you can see where the drains feed into this lake. So I have met with the property owners back last year around the Christmas time. And again, the first of this year, I set up a meeting with Matt and Julia with some representatives of the property owners around here. And we're sort of at a standstill as to what the city's responsibility is, maybe, or is not, in regards to the cleanup of this lake. And Matt, I hope I teed that up properly. Is that a fair assessment of where we are with this?
I think so.
Okay, am I missing anything?
No, I think that was a pretty good coverage of the situation.
So here's this odd relationship between the city getting a benefit of runoff water that is feeding into this lake, and what is the city's obligation, I would argue, in providing some assistance to the community around this lake. It's a problem for them. The city certainly has a benefit from water draining into this body of water, and whether or not the city should bear some of the cost of cleanup.
We've got a number of these. We've got obviously the little pond or lake behind Ms. Postel's property where public water runs into. Mr. Fountain, we also have something like this over in off of Crowell Drive with the subdivision over there. Starts with a W. Surrounded by a private lake, but we let water run from the waterways, from the street drainage into it. And then the city's position is, well, has been, that's a private area. We can't do anything about it, but it helps to facilitate public runoff. I know of 3 of them. I don't know, Mr. Fountain, you may know more. Obviously, probably do. We got to come up to an answer to this, because when it silts in and fails to perform, I guess like they thought it would privately, due to public intrusion, it's just not the expense of the homeowners by themselves. We're not going to figure out that answer today, but I definitely think we need to get with legal as a challenge to say, how do we get to the point to where we can fix these problems? It's not their problem alone. Anyway, I'd like to hear other comments on that. So I don't want to have testimonials. I want to get solutions is what I'd like to see. Mr. Fountain, can you speak to that?
You're correct, Mr. Chairman. There are a large number of these around the city. This was a very popular feature for developers in the 60s and 70s, kind of before modern environmental permitting, to put in these earthen dams, kind of block off a piece of marsh, dig it out, use the silt probably to help build some of the lots up, and then have an amenity that they could use to sell to the neighborhood for either a boating pond. If you get into the really large ones, like there's a few on James Island that are full, like boatable lakes, to some of the smaller ones like this where you may have been swimming, or some of the very small ones that are just kind of a recreational look to your backyard. The developers generally at the time did also build their streets to drain into those facilities, because that was obviously the lowland that previously had been the discharge points for the land before it was developed. Frequently, the developer would put easements, though not always, on the pipes that discharge from the road into the ponds, but then the ponds were left as often private property within the control of either a corporation or some other entity of the people who lived on the lake itself. And then, as you mentioned, the roads do discharge water through these facilities and then into the marsh. It's a little bit different in modern development. We would require in the stormwater manual, one of the most common methods still for developers is to build stormwater retention ponds, detention ponds.
Mhm.
We would require an easement through the pond in those situations, though not over the pond itself. And then the developer would sign a restrictive covenant that's recorded with the ROD, saying that those ponds are the maintenance responsibility of an HOA or a POA, depending if it's a homeowners group or a commercial property owners group. So
Mhm.
we do, for all new developments, require the HOA and POA to maintain those ponds. The city will maintain the pipes and the hard infrastructure, but not the day-to-day maintenance of the ponds, and not eventually the excavation of the silt from a water quality perspective, which does happen on a occasional basis. That these are a little bit different, right, in that they are not in an HOA or a POA. It's typically before those types of entities existed, but many of them, as Councilman Shade mentioned, this particular one has a corporation associated with it. Some of the other ones have a variety of different methods. Some are completely orphan style bonds where they're either individually owned by the property owner still with a common property line, or there's a defunct organization that is the ownership of the pond. I would say if we were using this as a modern case example, what the city would look to do is acquire easement through the pond that connected the pipes, just basically a channel, so that we would have the ability, if there were a flooding situation on the roads from lack of the pond being cleaned, to be able to go in and re-clean that channel to be able to still move the water out.
Right.
It's harder for the city to have any interest, obviously, in the amenity feature of a pond or a lake. But there is
agree with that.
that has been the history. Admittedly, again, we don't normally clean those easements, but we do have them for sort of an emergency purpose, that if an HOA goes defunct or is unable to provide cleaning and it's flooding city streets, there is the ability for the city to step in and do work that frequently under the restrictive covenants is able to be still billed to that HOA if it ever becomes back to be a solvent organization. And it is a difficult situation. It's one that developers generally do place on homeowners as part of the way they develop property and build property. The city of Charlotte looked years ago at changing their stormwater fee to take over all of the ponds in the city. And if you're familiar with the city of Charlotte, it's most of Mecklenburg County is in the city of Charlotte. They started getting down that path and ended up backing up and canceling because they realized what the cost would be
Yeah.
from a fee perspective to go through and clean all of those. I don't know if there's any other entities that do it. It is a very expensive task to fully clean out the ponds. I mean, as these neighbors were finding, I think they were looking on when they expanded out the initial bid they had gotten, and they may be on the call to speak to it, for the entire pond. I think a third of the pond was somewhere around $300,000 or a few $100,000. So when you're talking about the entire pond, you're probably into $1 million, which you can see how that would multiply out across the entire city.
Right.
So it is a difficult conversation. I mean, it's one that we certainly have a public interest in making sure those roads can drain. And there is a concept of acquiring an easement, like a channelized easement through the pond, to be able to clean that channel and clean the outfalls into the pond. There is a public value to that. And I'm certainly happy to kind of pause from explaining and see if anyone has any comments or other questions, since I kind of laid out at least what our understanding of the situation is.
That certainly sounds like something to be followed up on. The ability to be able to clear out the channel. Councilman Shade, I see your hand.
Yeah, I've already talked. The mayor has his hand up too.
I'm sorry, I
Go to
didn't
the
see
mayor
that.
first and then come back to me.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. You recognize?
I was going to comment that it would seem a reasonable path forward to try to investigate, pursue having the easement for a channel as if it were put in place today, if that's what we would normally do today. I would like to ask two questions, if we know kind of what is the condition of the outfall itself. I mean, is water able to properly flow out to the marsh, number one. Number two, I was just curious, I think you mentioned this was put in place in the 60s. Has there been maintenance at all done on the pond in the last 60 years? Is it just in the last decade or so that they haven't been doing it, or is this just the accumulation of 60 years that they haven't done any maintenance?
I can answer that for you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a separate, I don't hate to use the word corporation, but it's a separate entity that's apart from the rest of the Sandhurst Neighborhood Association, even though they may be part of the Sandhurst Neighborhood Association. So they have a board, they have officers, and they have funds that I believe they collect. I'm not sure how that assessment is actually handled, but they have from time to time expended funds to make repairs and some necessary improvements. And I mentioned that earthen dam, for instance, there was an issue with that, and they had to address it. So it hasn't been neglected by the homeowners association, by the corporation. But what has happened over time, it is accumulated to the point that it's now beyond their means financially to handle it. Now, what Matt said was absolutely correct. I mean, this is a benefit to the homeowners. I'm sure if you wanted to have an appraisal done of the properties, you could argue that the properties are worth X number of dollars more because of the presence of that lake, which now may be a liability instead. So I don't think that the folks are looking for to be absolved of all responsibility. I think what they're looking for is to figure out some kind of formula, perhaps, as to the city helping them address an issue that was contributed by the runoff water that the neighborhood received as a benefit. The roads are not flooding because runoff flows into this lake. I mean, that's the basic part of it. And I don't want to put the city into a liability issue without us understanding what we're biting off into. And as Councilmember Waring said, there are other amenity lakes or ponds like this, I'm sure, throughout the city. So what I was going to propose that we do is this. I wanted to bring it to this committee's attention first. This is an issue, and I'm sure that other folks may have had to address this. I'm looking at Councilman Rappel. I'm sure he may have run into this from time to time, perhaps. But I would like for us to sort of start a discussion in a direction on how to address this, to maybe do an assessment of how many, an inventory of how many of these bodies of water exist throughout the city, on James Island, on Johns Island, on Daniel Island, in West Ashley, and what is sort of the condition of that? How much of the city is taking "quote unquote" advantage of this as a runoff pond? I think that's sort of a good starting point if that inventory can be done, and sort of an assessment as to where we head with this before we go down just some promised roads that we're not going to be able to keep and absorb a very heavy financial toll, like Charlotte has decided to do.
Well, I think that part is good discussion. The part about I think each one may have their own unique aspect as we go about our drainage situation. I can think of one that if water is diverted, all of a sudden the pond that exists may be more functional than it is today, whereas that may not exist with this one. So getting back to the mayor's request, have there ever been any maintenance on this in the last 60 years? I think that would be an important one to ask, because if it took 60 years to get to this point, if you spread $1 million over 60 years, that ain't bad maintenance. So anyway, hopefully we definitely need to study it. So Mr. Fountain, what do you recommend the pathway forward on some of these things? You only have 999 things on your list. I mean,
what's one more?
We certainly could take a look at how many of these there are to get a sense of what what the scale of the issue is. I mean, certainly if many people have driven to Daniel Island, for instance, and you'll see the interconnected pond network that sits in almost every road within Daniel Island. So it is a good thing to get a sense of how many ponds are there and what would be the maintenance scope. I will say many of these coastal ponds experienced a real shock in Hurricane Hugo and took a lot of the debris and accumulation that they've had. That hurricane event where you had that huge surge in wind push a lot of debris, and you've seen the pictures of
Right.
Folly Beach and things, a lot of redistribution of material. So there are multiple things that cause the coastal area ponds especially to have concerns, in addition to obviously water coming in off the streets, which is a valid issue as well.
Right. Mr. Mayor, you had your hand up.
So I was just curious if our own water plan team had had this on their radar screen or not, and they're not done yet, whether we could ask them to do some kind of high level projection on it, or give us their thinking on it, number
I
one.
think that's a great idea.
Number two, and not to muddle things further, but just as maybe a warning, I did go to a panel discussion over at the Citadel a couple of weeks ago when they opened their climate change center, or their climate center, and one of the panelists was quite knowledgeable about algae, and you can end up with some real algae problems in these ponds if they're not maintained, and unfortunately many that are privately owned have not been well maintained, some public as well, and has led to real algae blooms, fish kills, some toxicity. So anyway, I don't mean to complicate things matter, but there's a biological side to all of this too.
You're right. As a matter of fact, we had ownership in one, and we actually put some sterile carp in there to keep the algae down. Actually, carp get pretty big. They feed well.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great idea. Any more input on this? If not,
I don't see him on the call, but I'll be happy or ask.
I saw Mr. Morris just kind of
to talk to
dialed
Dale.
in. I just
So
saw.
Dale is on the call.
I don't know if you heard it, Mr. Morris. You want to comment on including this in the water plan? Some of this discussion, if you heard it.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, I was a little bit late.
It's all right.
Had a delay there, but I've been listening to Matt. I have to check to see if the granularity of the water plan team's mapping that's already been done includes this, and if not, then what it would mean to look more deeply. I would want to talk with Matt to see exactly what we're trying to map here and understand. So I think that's a good idea. Some of these ponds that used to be tidally connected that now been blocked off, they're a challenge. They may store some stormwater, but they may become a future problem, a future problem for us as we look forward, 25 years. So let's try to understand that. I think the water plan team would make some recommendations on that. And then one other thing, just the mayor just said, it isn't just algae. There's a particular bacteria called verboscis that these ponds are notorious for allowing to accumulate bad, and verboscis, it's going to be exacerbated. The prevalence of verboscis bacterial flourishing is going to be exacerbated, made worse by climate change because of the warmth of the water. And verboscis can lead to a whole bunch of nasty skin conditions, as well as the need for amputations of limbs. So it's pretty dangerous stuff. So understanding how this works, and if there's a way to manage this from a public health perspective is good. I'm not so sure that the water plan team would be the experts for that, but understanding what that is and making plans for it is absolutely essential, I think.
Why don't we let you and Mr. Fountain have a conversation on this offline, and then maybe report back out on it at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. H3, discussion on Wallenberg area pond. I asked to put this on. Mr. Fountain, you have a map of the area?
I do, Mr. Sherman. Let's see if I can bring that up.
Yeah, there it is.
So this is the pond facility here, Highway 61, where Paul Cantrell comes in here, Raoul Wallenberg Boulevard being the road that comes here. Believe this is the Jewish Community Center, I think, here, just for kind of location, Sam Rittenberg here. And I do have a second map I thought might be helpful. These are harder to look at sometimes.
I think it's better. That
But
looks
they do show kind of what drainage system comes into that
right.
existing lake. So that existing lake does receive a little bit of water from some surrounding communities. But it does take quite a bit of water from this part of Raoul Wallenberg, and then
Right.
from the section of 61 and the old section of
Well, Savage Road.
Savage Road here, yes, that comes across. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so that area does all drain back into those lakes as well as some of these frontage roads, certainly.
Well, the part, go down Wallenberg where it drains into the lake. Do you know when that was added? No, right. Wallenberg, yeah. Come
Yeah,
back.
so this section of Raoul Wallenberg is the section that drains into the lake.
Okay.
It's from 61 basically all the way
Across
up to right here.
Right. I mean, that wasn't always the case. When I was a kid, these two lakes or whatever ponds were not connected. Okay. The area closest to your arrow used to be freshwater, and the area further, so that's right, it used to be freshwater. And in the area I'm gonna say south of that used to be brackish, and it still is brackish, by the way. Now, my understanding is we own this property now, in particular the peninsula that didn't the beach company, Mr. Mayor, recently conveyed the property to the city?
So I just signed the closing papers for the Woodmere tract that was part of the Greenbelt application. And Ms.
Okay.
Stoney told me that she was going to work next on getting the closing done for the donation from the beach company to us. So they've agreed to donate it to us. The closing actually has not occurred yet, but we expect it to happen certainly before the end of the year.
Okay, great. So it's in process. One of the areas, if you go, I guess, to the northeastern corner of your map, right in here, that's the houses there, back up to that lake, which has been kind of silted in. And one of the thinking was, when we do get control of these, how we lower some of the water in Colonial Lake sometimes when we know big events are on the horizon?
Yes, sir.
If we go, can you go, I guess, further east, maybe not on this map? Yeah, right there. The little round area years ago was an oxidation pond that I understood never really got into use. And eventually it used to be a dike or a gate there that got knocked out years ago. Wondering if when doing heavy rain events, especially storms and stuff, believe it or not, Ashley Hall Road gets inundated. Not the last storm, but maybe in 15, I believe. You had like maybe 3-4 feet of water on Ashley Hall Road right there. Wondering if there's a way we can put, I don't know, check valves or dike or gate or whatever, that we can lower these waters prior to heavy rain events, known heavy rain events approaching these neighborhoods. Because if pipes aren't cleaned over there, I'm telling you, it's very sensitive. It's kind of like our traffic. As long as there's not a wreck, it flows well. As soon as you have a hiccup, things begin to back up and create problems. But it seems like a fairly cost-effective problem to potentially fix or improve, let me put it like that, Mr. Felton. I'm rambling, but can you help out?
No, I definitely follow you, Mr. Chairman. I think once, as the mayor mentioned, the closing is finished and we can see what restrictions, if any, are on the property from Greenbelt and from other activities, then we could look at what the potential ecological impact would be, if any, from changing the water level, and try to figure out if there's a route, like you're saying, to either be able to discharge water in advance of a storm or do something else to help bring a little extra capacity in. I think there is certainly some potential benefit to that, as we do see some flooding in some of these areas. Certain Raoul Wallenberg's had some flooding challenges as well.
Right. And cause some years ago, the area from 61 to Wallenberg, I thought was connected into this area. I don't think it was, in other words, if you went back 30 years ago, I don't think it was connected on that area. And it has been over the years. Also, if you can go, you see where you see North Woodmere Drive, which is right off of Ashley Hall Roads, south. You had your pointer there for a second, Mr. Right. Go just to the left of the end. To the left, go west to the end. Bring it down to North Woodmere Drive. The actual wordings, right? Okay, if you go just to the left of that end,
Oh,
I think that's one of the parcels that we're going to be. We just closed on that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor. If you were to go straight forward with that arrow, that's part of the area and part of that island or peninsula, I should say, where we have a growing homeless encampment. And that's the area that I spoke about last week that had gunshots fired, and we, obviously the police patrolled through, but to no avail. But hopefully, once we get control of that, not that I want to cut down any trees, but if we can go in there at least bush hog or grind down so you can just see in between the trees. It's a wonderful neighborhood on each side of those lakes. But I got to tell you, the growing homeless problem in Charleston, West Ashley, is largely unseen because we have more wooded area than the peninsula has. But this is an area they've gone and tried to intervene and try to get the people to go downtown, but they still persist. As I said, this was about 3 weeks ago now that they had gunshots over there, but it's definitely an area that we need to clean out so you can have some visibility. You used to could drive on that piece of property, probably before COVID. I drove down there a couple of weeks ago, and there's no longer even a driveway that you can go through. We just need to go in there with one of those grinder mulcher type things and go in between the trees, and so when our policemen go, they can actually see what is there or not. Councilmember Appel, I see your hand.
I'm good. I just broke my.
Councilmember Shea, I see.
Yeah, so thank you. And does this, maybe I just missed it in y'all's discussion, but does this lake drain somewhere?
Yeah, a good point. It drains underneath Ashley Hall Road and goes out into the marsh. So the way it's supposed to work, and it did for a lot of years before it kind of got silted in. And remember, this was privately owned, and still is until it property gets conveyed. Water would come down Wallenberg, or from 61 to Wallenberg, and eventually into this area, flow straight through, and eventually underneath a culvert on Ashley Hall Road and out into the marsh. One of the things that happens, if you put your pointer back to where the oxidation pond was, Mr. Fountain, okay, if you go into the salt water marsh, or just go, that's right, you can barely see a canal there that goes straight out to the Ashley. And there was a time that thing probably was 15 feet across. Now it's probably 8 feet across. It just silts in. So you take the water from this area, and it's slowed up during heavy rain events, and of course it creates water intrusion on some of the homes, or many homes on it fills up the backyards on Montclair Drive. It's one of those things where people literally pray, hoping the rain stops before it gets to their house. So,
And I think Councilmember Waring, that apartment complex is part of the Windjammer and
it is.
and the Windermere, and they take a hit too.
Right. Right. All of
and
it flows into that area. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it flows into that area. And I think with some slight improvements and some management, I think it can continue to function as it once did.
You and our districts intersect right around this particular point.
Correct. Right.
And so our constituents experience the same kind of issues that we're trying to address with us, which is, this is another lake. This is privately owned lake. Here we go.
This was designed to flow through, and I think we can get it back there, get that again. And as I said, doing heavy rain events, so we can get a management system and lower it. Some of these people that fear flooding will, I mean, we don't need to dig shafts and get pump stations and things like that. I think natural gravity flow can do what it does best. But I got to tell you, some of the people that live along Montclair Drive, they know the history on this like the back of their hand. I think it'd be helpful to you, Mr. Fountain, and maybe arriving at a solution. But anyway, this is one. As soon as we get control of it, Mr. Mayor. Oh, I see your hand, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's easy to conceive, maybe hard to achieve, but easy to conceive. Taking ownership of this property would allow for some more water management and storage to occur. So we look forward to exploring that. I just signed the closing papers. I think it was just Friday. So now by today or tomorrow, it should be recorded. So we're just become owners of the North Woodmere site, and I will talk to Chief Walker about some enforcement and look into the matter of the encampment there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Fountain, I'm all in on that one. I know we'll have some discussions in the short future on that one. East Oak Forks, I'm sorry, small project update, the retrofit of flood acquisition properties. Item 4, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an update. It's a series of 4 projects that we had funded under the small project allocation in a previous year. The first of the projects is complete. That was so these are, I should back up. These are the retrofits of homes that were acquired under FEMA grants.
Right.
From, they have been flood damaged homes, where the city purchased the home, demolished with the permission and agreement of the homeowner, acquired the home, we demolished the home to prevent repetitive flood loss, and then the city had looked at, well, what else can we do with these properties other than basically continual maintenance on them, trying to keep them up as a wooded lot, as you were mentioning, which comes with its own challenges. So we decided to take 4 of them and do a project where we basically dig out a little bit of the land, add some extra stormwater storage, and then landscape them back into being attractive, relatively low maintenance properties that help deal with stormwater for the remaining homeowners who did not have flood damage or sell their properties at this point, but helping prepare for, again, these intensifying storms and improve the stormwater qualities in the system. So we finished our first one of these. It was in Shoreham and James Island. There's kind of 2 pictures on the right. That we tied 2 small projects together here. We used the property we acquired to give us maintenance access to an existing rear yard drainage system through the neighborhood that previously we really couldn't get into unless we drove through someone's side yard with heavy equipment, which is very challenging. So we went back in there, basically rehabilitated the drainage system, added in ditches that could store water and convey water, obviously grass those, and then tied them into the previous lot where we did some grading to hold a little bit more water, added an access pathway for the heavy equipment to get back there that is kind of buried below ground so you can't really see it, and then re-landscaped it with native vegetation to give us some ecological benefits, but also some additional water uptake and some beautification that's also lower maintenance. So that first one is done. We've got 3 more that are, the design is complete, the permitting is complete, and we have our field ops has done the initial site grading. Those are in the East Oak, West Oak Forest neighborhoods, 1 on Shelley Road, 2 on Oak Forest. We've got a contractor that we're finalizing contracts with for the planting. So those will hopefully be complete by the end of this year for the next set of projects, and we'll move forward with looking for some additional properties to do this type of work on. So again, relatively quick start projects, not incredibly expensive, but using using existing property to do more than sort of just sit there and be vacant.
All right. Go ahead. I don't want to preempt you. Go ahead, Mr. Fallon.
That was the end of this one, Mr. Chairman. It kind of leads because of the three of them are in the East Oak Forest, West Oak
Right.
Forest neighborhood. It sort of leads right into the next item. If you'd like me to start with that
That's
one.
great. That's great.
Yeah, so this was those three projects were kind of our quick start work in the East Oak Forest, West Oak Forest neighborhood, which are an area that we have some severe flooding challenges in as well. Just for reminder of where that is, Highway 17 here, Savannah Highway. If you look to your left as you're driving out of town, it's the south side. This is the large Baptist church that has kind of a drainage system that comes to their parking lot. It's a Finn's Car Wash next door. Across the street is an insurance agency that kind of backs up on Old Finger of Marsh that comes up here. The drainage just continues up. This is Oak Forest Drive, which as you continue up basically comes into Playground Road here.
Right.
Keats and Shelley here. So those retrofits sit on Shelley and then kind of on this intersection of Shelley and West Oak Forest here. So that will provide us some additional storage. We get some pretty severe flooding kind of through this section here,
Right.
but also backing up across the street into more of the West Oak Forest neighborhoods as you keep moving. Basically all the water in this whole slide here drains south through that system, through some rear yard ditches, down across 17, out through the church and down into this marsh finger here across the Greenway. So those are our quick start projects and the slightly longer term, show some modeling. So there's a more challenging overall issue in that you can see where we see flood inundation in larger storm events, kind of in these colored areas. This is some initial modeling that we've been doing. You can see it comes well outside that drainage ditch and into people's yards and homes in many areas. Some properties that regularly flood through this section, Keats here. The small projects we're doing certainly provide some short-term benefit, but don't resolve this type of solution. So we did fund this project also as the analysis level of this project is a small project allocation project. We have done some internal modeling to get a sense of how to scope that. We've been working with the Baptist Church, the shopping center, the Finn's Car Wash, and the insurance agency across the street to obtain easements across this canal system. We've hired a surveyor, completed the surveys, prepared some plats, most of the way through negotiating with those property owners who've all been really good to work with. They all have a vested interest in trying to see that flood reduced and also want to see some benefits to the neighborhood, which has been great to have property owners who so far have been very interested in helping out the neighbors who are flooding. Once we have those easements, we'll be able to get permits to clean that system, which will be a great starting point to move more water out more efficiently as well. That's within our small project allocation. And then since we've gotten this modeling done internally, we've hired a consulting firm to take a more formal approach to this modeling and look at the improvement projects. What we think the early suggestions are going to be are increasing the pipe sizes under the Greenway will be a major benefit. There'll be some benefit to increasing the pipes in the parking lot of the Baptist Church where there's a driveway that crosses it. That benefit won't really multiply until you also then add an additional pipe likely under Highway 17. The consulting firm is the engineering firm is looking at what are our sizes we would need and what are those relative costs, what we're likely to bring back to council, though of course we're a little early still until we get our actual formal report from the engineering company with costs included, is probably the funding to increase that pipe size under the Greenway with some new pipes that have check valves on them, which will protect the upstream ecology, but also allow more water out during major rain events, which would significantly improve the flooding for a relatively reasonable amount of money. And then look at a follow-on project, and we'll have to figure out how much this would cost to increase that pipe size under Highway 17, which would give some more significant improvements and help bring that water out from people's homes. So we kind of have work that we've already completed, work that we're in progress on, and then we have the potential for a couple of large scale capital projects over the next few years. Hopefully the first one being pretty quick start and the other one, if it's Highway 17, being a much longer term but larger scale project. Just as a quick refresh, these are like the landscaping plans for these properties. This is the intersection of Keats and Oak Forest here, where we have the two properties that we're retrofitting. The drainage system kind of comes right through here and across the street. Then one other property down in Shelley, you can actually see in gray very subtly here where our maintenance access pathway is. This is another lot that will let us get to that rear yard drainage system that drains all these neighborhoods, which right now is very hard to get back and maintain. And then just a summary slide of where we are. Next step is finalizing those drainage easements so we can get our Army Corps and DHEC OCRM permits to be able to do that maintenance, and then go through looking for capital funding on the pipe size improvements. So a lot going on. It's definitely a neighborhood that needs drainage improvements, and I think there's been great support so far from council and the small project allocation, and hopefully continued support as we move into the capital project side.
Okay, can you go back to slide 9, Mr. Fountain?
Yes.
Right. Right in that Keats Road, Shelley Road, area, that intersection, it gets so flooded in there. I've got a full size Ford F-150. During rain events, I can't go through there because my pipe gets covered, my exhaust pipe gets covered. And this sounds great. Everything you said, progress is on the way. What are some things is there anything I can do about going door to door to help with these easements? I mean, ask these people, how far along are we in getting these easements in hand?
So we've been working with the Baptist church. They've had some questions about, obviously they have a driveway that comes across it, a pedestrian bridge that comes across it, a lot of parking that kind of parallels the easement. They've been a very good partner so far. They're just been trying to get some clarity on how we protect their property while also providing the ability to do maintenance. We've been working with our legal department. We think we have a document that everyone is on board with. The church now has to take it back through their approval processes, but they feel pretty comfortable with it. So we'll see if there's any questions there. I mean, certainly any support with the church leadership, if anyone's familiar with the church, is helpful, though they, I think, are very familiar with the flooding in the neighborhoods and do authentically want to help and make a difference there. The shopping center has been great to work with so far. We do need to finalize those documents. So I don't want to, until it's time to sign, it's never a
done deal.
But most of their property is more the actual marsh side. So it isn't very high value land. So we're pretty optimistic they will continue to support it. Same thing with the car wash, where it's really just the existing channel next to them. And then the insurance agency that's on the north has so far, again, also been very open to providing easement, mostly through open marsh on their property, but still high value. The next step, once we have those easements, we'll be working through the core permitting process and the OCRM DHEC permitting process to get the ability to clean those, which will provide some additional relief.
So in your opinion, what is the best thing we can do in the short term to bring some relief? I understand the pipes under the road 17, obviously it's a longer term effort. And by the way, what's the size of those pipes going underneath 17?
Highway 17 is a single box culvert. It is a roughly 4 foot by 5 foot box culvert.
Wow, gotcha.
So it's a big culvert, but not as big as the amount of water trying to flow.
Yeah, not for all of that. Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, back to the question, is there anything we can do? I guess anything north of that culvert to kind of bring some relief?
So the shortest term improvements will be finalizing those drainage easements and getting the permits to be able to clean out the system, which will very much help water at least leave at low tide more efficiently. It'll still be slow. The Greenway, I mentioned Highway 17 is a 4 foot by 5 foot box culvert. The Greenway is 2 48-inch pipes down here. So it is a pretty strict constriction with all the additional water. So that is also because it's not our infrastructure, but CWS has been a great partner in the past with work on the Greenway, and certainly the city has an interest in it. That we think that is not a very long-term capital project. That's more on the order of a few years rather than a decade, like something like Highway 17 could theoretically be. It's 5 to 10 years. but yes, obtaining the easements and doing the cleaning would be the shortest term improvement. You know, optimistically, you could get that permit in a year and be cleaning next year.
You know, we put culverts under St. Andrews Boulevard for phase 1 of Forest Park. I mean, why would it take 5 to 10 years? I mean, who all allies we need to get in contact with to maybe speed this up to get a larger pipe, culvert, etc. underneath 17? I mean, why would it take a decade to get the approval to do that? I mean, I'm just a layperson on this.
100% understand, Mr. Chairman. You know, Highway 17, between being the evacuation route and the level of traffic that it has, it's likely it would be an underground project rather than open cut like Sanders Boulevard was, where we were able to redirect traffic kind of to either side.
Right.
There's not much room to either side here to be able to move the traffic. It's possible we could be faster. That's why you could be on that 5-year time frame, but that's likely. We have not done the cost estimates for sizing, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if that's not $10 million just to put that box culvert in. So it just gets much more complicated once you're into that scale of infrastructure with all the utilities that run under 17. It is possible that it could be faster, and I think DOT would be very supportive of the concept of relieving drainage. It's just trying to juggle the impacts at the same time in the permitting load.
Okay, something like that you'd have to cut. You couldn't do some kind of boring.
It likely would be boring. I think that was the most likely approach. But even when you're boring, you have to close lanes while you're under parts of the road, because you can't risk like a collapse while they're working under the roadway. Because normally for jack and bore type activities like that, there's often people literally in the ground under the road, like hand digging and jacking the pipes under. It's a relatively complicated project.
Yes. So if I'm hearing you correctly, major cleaning, and then maybe some help with CPW underneath the greenway.
That is so we always try to phase our projects in this, like, instead of saying, oh, it might be 5 or 10 years to be able to do the end of the project, let's do nothing until everything's lined up and permitted and designed.
Right.
We say, well, if we see incremental improvements from other work that we can do faster, start that work, but size it to be able to handle the future improvements. So again, the cleaning, maybe within a year, we've already been working on it for about 6 months between survey and easement acquisition. But if you can get it permitted and cleaned within about a year, and then in that same time period, be working on the design and permitting of the greenway, maybe the greenway work gets done the year or two after that, again, depending on schedule and time frame. And then while you're working all of that, you're also working on the Highway 17 DOT part, and maybe you roll out of construction on that, and you're basically into construction the next year or two on the Highway 17 work. So it isn't saying no improvements, it's just sort of an increasing scale of improvement as we go through those projects.
Okay, all right. Well, we definitely need to get this presentation to the people at East Oak Forest. I mean, this is a great explanation. I mean, and they need to know. Obviously, we got at least one person who's received. I sent you the letter with FEMA's refusing flood coverage for this lady.
And just to provide a little clarity on that, Mr. Chairman, they are refusing standard coverage and shifting the coverage to what's called the repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss coverage, which is a different type of coverage, but still is an NFIP insurance policy. It's just it is something we don't want to see, right? We do want to see homes that can get standard coverage and be covered that way.
Right. I don't know how many other people got those type letters. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was poking around down there a couple weekends ago when we had what I called the double rain bomb. And, you know, we had a big shot of rain and things were backing up, and then we had another one and it really started backing up. I just happened to be out in my car and I drove on both sides of Savannah Highway, and that little almost like a bridge or causeway in the Ashley River Baptist parking lot, it does kind of serve as a dam. You know, it doesn't allow water to freely flow on down. I do believe I hear, Matt, that we need to have more conveyance under the greenway, but you got that marsh area down there. As long as the tide's not too high, it could hold some water, but it's not able to get there as quickly as it might. One of the reasons being that little causeway. So if we were able to get the easement with the church, and as Matt said, they've been very cooperative. They're good, really good folks there. And redesign the way that little bridge or causeway works. I think that one easier, smaller project would at least help. And then I gotta say, I went on the other side. I'm a little surprised that the size of that culvert is 4 by 5 feet now, and I see the plan here to replace it with 2 box culverts, even bigger than that. But the 4 by 5 is even bigger than it appears if you get out there and look. And part of the reason is it appears to be kind of grown up around both sides of the street, which I would just question, Matt, that would be a DOT culvert. Have they inspected that thing recently? Don't they have some easement or right to make sure that their culvert under the street is clear? And in which case, I certainly would urge, in fact, if that exists, even help them get that done to make sure that that one existing culvert is running as clear as it can, if you know what I mean.
They do have a right of way where they can work within the right of way in the culvert. Typically, we don't work on their large scale culverts under their major highways like that, because they are generally concerned that we don't, destabilize their highway. But we can ask them about looking at cleaning that. A lot of these areas are very hard to clean because of the tide, is how much of the tide comes into those pipes. We can certainly talk to them and see if they've done what they can. I would just point out, Mayor, that the sizing we put on here was just for some in-house, very rough modeling that we did. These aren't necessarily the proposed future sizes. It was just to say, if we improved everything out here, how much flood reduction might we get from making them pretty big?
Yeah.
So it might be less improvement than that. It might be a little bit more than that. That's what the consulting company is working on right now, is what are the right sizes to build.
Right. But please reach out to them and partner with them to even with the existing access to clear it as much as possible. A case in point, I remember, even though it took us a long time to get the outfall behind Osaka cleared out, that once we got the DOT to inspect and clear out that line under Folly Road from the backside of my neighborhood over to Osaka, that even that made a big difference prior to getting the outfall fully cleared out. So anyway, from my own visual observation there that day in the rain, it certainly wouldn't hurt. I'll say that.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Pell, I see your hand.
Appreciate the recognition. Councilman Waring and Matt, I'd be happy to help coordinate a meeting with the church. I've gotten to know those folks over the years. They're over in District 11, and as the mayor said, and he's 100% right, they're extremely good, community-minded people over there. So I'd be happy to help to the extent that's useful. So just holler at me offline.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fountain. That was really great detailed information. I appreciate you doing that. Item 6, Stormwater Utility Approval of Professional Services Contract with Black and Veatch. Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe one of the committee members had some interest in us potentially looking at an alternative billing system for our
me.
stormwater utility. Yes, it may have been you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the first action step out of a long procurement process of going out for qualifications, receiving some very skilled, interested firms. We went through a selection committee process, selected Black and Veatch, negotiated with them. This is the first phase of work. So this will be assessing the CWS billing system and account management system, as well as our system, and then making basically a few different recommendations of a few different options of ways we could manage our bills and how we would run both the computer program to actually track and be able to bill all these people, as well as which entity we end up billing through or with, or if we do it ourselves. So this would be phase one. Phase two would then be the implementation of whichever option we select. This phase is supposed to take a few months, and then the next phase is supposed to be completed within about another 9 months after that. So within the next year, we would have an account management system that we would be able to use to either bill through CWS, county tax offices, through the city itself, a number of different options.
Right. As chair, I probably shouldn't make this motion, but if you all don't, I will. Can we have a motion for approval?
Move for approval.
Move for approval. How about we do it like unanimous hold hands and jump off the cliff together?
I'm telling you, it's probably moved. I think there's a second in there somewhere.
I think you got a second and a third on this one.
That's right. We have no more discussion. We're ready to move forward. Call for the question. All in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
any opposed. I want to thank everybody, the mayor, Mr. Fountain, legal, everybody for working on this one and listening to it. Move for them. And Councilmember Pell, by the way, still got to follow up with you on a system to, I thought just initial thoughts, Mr. Navarro. Anyway, on the collection side, on those who are in arrears and going back at least 3 years, I think that was a great idea. But anyway, so we can talk about that offline as well. Thank you again, Mr. Fountain and your team. Item 7, recommendation to nominate Mr. Charles Steiner to the Peninsula Perimeter Protection. Now I know council members probably, I don't know that we all have thought about that. I think it's been a couple of weeks ago. We just passed the final reading, I think, last week. So I wanted to put for West Ashley spot, Mr. Charles Steiner. Let me give my rationale for recommending Mr. Steiner. Number one, vast knowledge of the Charleston area, got great sensibilities about the historic district. I think he put at least 10 years, maybe more, on the BAR. And I think about half of that, he's actually served as the chair of the BAR. Raised up West Ashley, graduated from St. Andrews, very familiar with, in particular, a lot of the, well, as we say, inner West Ashley areas, you know, that were done in the 60s, 70s, maybe late 50s, 60s, 70s, that have drainage problems today. And a lot of those drainage problems are just old infrastructure. Water can't get out fast enough, just as you just kind of alluded to, Mr. Mayor, over there on Eso Forest, you know, trying to get culverts clean just so they can operate efficiently. The point you made about the little bridge at the church, those backhanded knowledge of the area that we serve are so vital. So I think, because I think you bring a good perspective of West Ashley's needs, as well as respect for the peninsula as well. So that's why I want to put his name up, West Ashley. So that's what that is.
If I may respond, I
Yes,
know
sir.
Mr. Steiner and his family, and I'd be
Great.
happy to include him. I do plan to put together, council member, I guess about 4 or 5 people together at once.
Sure.
Honestly, I hadn't focused on it since we just updated the ordinance, and because we're supposed to make sure we include somebody basically from all parts of the city.
Correct.
I think we're going to add about 4 or 5 people. So I'm happy to include him, but do you mind if I just drill down? It may take me another month or so to come back to council with a little slate, so to speak.
I don't mind at all. I don't mind at all. I think council members need to have more of an opportunity to give you some recommendations also. So,
but he would be an excellent one.
well, thank you, sir. I'll, you know, bring that up at council, so maybe we can remind other council members to start thinking of, you know, I mean, people in James Island, Johns Island, Daniel Island, that kind of thing. But anyway, thanks a lot on that one. I think you'll be a great addition to the committee. It is 6:18. Mr. Morris, can you give us a quick update on Haggett? Or would you prefer to go to the next meeting? It's your call.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So, City Design Division, well, let me back up here. Haygood Avenue is, of course, major intersection, a major thoroughfare for the city. It is in not great shape. It is next to West Edge and the landfill under West Edge. It is directly to the west of Gatson Green, Charleston Housing Authority property just south of the Citadel, and then north of MUSC and near the crosstown. So it is a very important area. As I would describe it, it's a bit of a backyard condition now.
Just excuse me 1 second, I want to correct you. September clock crosstown.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I apologize for.
Councilman Gregory would hold me accountable to that.
That's fine. I apologize for the oversight. So we looked at what can we do about this area with the transportation funding that's available from the federal government out there, from the environmental justice funding that's available that's out there, from the environmental and climate change adaptation funding that's about there. City Design Division had a workshop on this in the late spring. A number of stakeholders came by. We and Mr. Councilman or Mr. Chairman, you were there, and Councilman Gregory there.
Right.
We decided to not pursue a very lengthy process of working through a planning grant and applying for it and just try to do our own plan and then use that plan quickly to go after some of the public funding that's available from the federal government these days. So over the summer, we put together a source of funding. We have stakeholders that have agreed to kick in funding. So MUSC, West Edge, Charleston Housing Authority, and the Citadel have all agreed to kick in some money. That's about between $110,000 and $130,000. That's their commitment anyway. And we sort of discussed internally that a plan like this, if we were to fund it ourselves, it would probably cost $200 to $225. So we asked, we got the final commitment in from one of the stakeholders in August. We asked the VFRC when could we get money from the city to do this? And I think the decision was made to plug it into the 2024 city budget. So we are ready. We have a scope of work. Again, this would look at stormwater, tidal water, and some groundwater challenges there. We'll look at the environmental impacts from the landfill that's there because it impacts Gatson Creek. And likely in the future, groundwater and stormwater and tidal pushes may impact the Gatson Green neighborhood. Looking at the intersection of Haygood and Fishburne, because that is an area that just is underwater all the time. Looking at transportation improvements and beautification along Haygood between the Citadel and MUSC to make that more of a front door condition, not a back door condition. The road is subsiding. We know that's going on there. That's because it was all marsh. At one point, understand what we need to do to manage that subsidence, and then beautification, and then looking also at transit-oriented development, because that's an area where the West Ashley bike and pedestrian bridge will land, and how do we knit all that together with this sort of Haygood improvement plan? So we are ready to go. Just sort of, the commitments are there. We have a governance committee outlined, sketched out, ready to go, just waiting for the city's funding, and then we'll launch the plan next year. We'll acknowledge that city design is City Design Division under planning. They are rather busy, but they are prepared for this work. So we just have to schedule it in and get it done. And we will, sorry, one final thing, sir. We will take these contributions, financial commitments from others in the city money, and a governance committee will directly procure the planning team for this.
Okay, so if the city hypothetically could contribute its share from another source, would that speed up?
Yes,
for the 24 budget.
Yes, sir.
So the amount from the city that we would like to have would be what's the amount?
I think BFRC has told me that they have up to $125,000 reserved for this in the 2024 budget. But again, whether we need all of that is an open question. We have to go and talk to a number of consultants to see who could do this work for us.
But so our other funding partners are pretty much at the table?
They are. They've committed ranges of funding, and I think the low range of that is about 110 and the high range is about 130.
Okay. All right. Listen, thank you for all the work. That workshop was very good months and months ago, because I think but for that workshop, we wouldn't be having this conversation right at this moment.
That's right.
So, and now that, some of the information that's come out on Gadsden Green, Mr. Mayor, 3 years old. It could be something pretty good if those buildings, I'm jumping ahead, but if those buildings are completed, this Haggard Avenue project, Gadsden Green, Haggard Avenue, Gadsden Creek, all can be the Citadel, obviously a direct route into Medical University. It all makes sense. So thank you for being a catalyst to getting Mr. Morris, for getting these stakeholders, frankly, to the table. It was a workshop on a Friday. I got to be frank, I didn't want to go to it on Friday. And then we got there and found out what the discussion was. Then you couldn't get rid of us. But anyway,
So,
It's an important project. That area has a lot of need and potential. So,
Mr. Mayor.
so if you think about Haygood from the McDonald's all the way to the Citadel, most of the property is within the public realm. If you include Harmon Field, the Housing Authority, the Citadel properties, the wetlands that will remain on the west side of Haygood, with the new outfall plan for behind Stobie Field, a good part of that frontage on Haygood will be wetlands and public realm along there. And Lord knows the condition of the road is just terrific. I mean, terrifically bad. It's so
Right.
horrible. I don't, anyway. So the thought was to really, I know I've used this term for Sam Rittenberg, and we used it for Folly Road, but I mean, that whole stretch of Haygood needs to be redesigned from scratch. And here's a challenge to us all. I think it could be one of the most beautiful streets in the city of Charleston.
I agree.
I do. If you plan it right, and talk about a gateway road up to the Citadel and the stadium, I know that they're on board to help beautify it and make it so much nicer. I met with President Cole at Medical University. He's on board. We really have a lot of good stakeholders,
Right.
are willing to participate and buy in. It's like everything else. It may take us a little while to get there, but if you think about when they redevelop Gadsden Green, to set the building back and create that some green space and public space on both sides of the street, and then the traffic count there isn't that big. I mean, you could most likely have a road diet and have ample sidewalk and bike and pedestrian facility on both sides of the street, and do tree plantings. It could be a truly beautiful boulevard of Charleston.
I agree. I mean, you can, if you're right, frame that street and change it entirely, head it into, well, you're right, to the stadium, and quite frankly, the Citadel.
That's right.
All right, listen, Mr. Morris, thanks for pulling that together on a short notice, as you did. And I mean, I'm glad to see that the progress, and I guess we just get in there and get a wrestling match going with Miss, she's not on the call, so I can say this, Miss Wharton, on trying to speed up this money. That's it, unless anybody has any final comments. Well, listen, great meeting. We covered a lot of ground. Appreciate the extra time. Look forward to seeing all you tomorrow at the meeting.